After a while, the jumbled colors on the big screen resolved themselves into an image of Hideyoshi O'Leary, grinning like a pussycat beside an empty goldfish bowl. "Well, what happened?" von Schlichten asked, after they had exchanged greetings. "How do Yoorkerk like the movies? And did you get the Procyon and the Northern Lights loose?" "Yoorkerk was deeply impressed," O'Leary replied. "His story is that he is, and always was, the true and ever-loving friend of the Company. He acted to prevent, quote, certain disloyal elements, unquote, from harming the people and property of the Company. Procyon's on the way to Konkrook. I'm holding Northern Lights here and Northern Star at Skilk. Where do you want them sent?" "Leave Northern Star at Skilk for the time being. Tell the Company's great and good friend, King Yoorkerk, that the Company expects him to contribute some soldiers for the campaign here and against Keegark, when that starts. Be sure you get the best armed and best trained regiments he has, and get them down here as soon as possible. Don't send any of your Kragans or Karamessians troops here, though. Hold them in Grank till we make sure of the high quality of Yoorkerk's friendship." "Well, General, I think we can be pretty sure now. You see, he turned Rakkeed the Prophet over to me." "What?" Von Schlichten felt his monocle starting to slip and took a firmer grip on it. "Who?" "Pay me thumb, he didn't drop it," Hideyoshi O'Leary said. "Why, Rakkeed the Prophet. Yoorkerk was holding our ships and our people in case we lost. He was also holding Rakkeed at the palace in case we won. Of course, Rakkeed thought he was an honored guest, right up till Yoorkerk's guards dragged him in and turned him over to us." "That geek," von Schlichten said, "is too smart for his own good. Some of these days, he's going to play both ends against the middle, and both ends'll fold in on him and smash him." A suspicion occurred to him. "You sure this is Rakkeed? It would be just like Yoorkerk to try to sell us a ringer." O'Leary shook his head solemnly. "I thought of that, right away. This is the real article. Karamessinis Constabulary and Intelligence Officer certified him for me. What do you want me to do? Send him down to Konkrook?" Von Schlichten shook his head. "Get the priests of the locally venerated gods to put him on trial for blasphemy, heresy, impersonating a prophet, practicing witchcraft without a license, or any other ecclesiastical crimes you or they can think of. Then, after he's been given a scrupulously fair trial, have the soldiers of King Yoorkerk behead him, and stick his head up over a big sign, in all native languages, 'Rakkeed the False Prophet,' and have audiovisuals made of the whole business, trial and execution, and be sure that the priests and Yoorkerk's officers are in the foreground and our people stay out of the pictures." "Soap and towels for General Pontius von Pilate," Paula Quinton called out. "That's an idea. I was wondering what to give Yoorkerk as a testimonial present," Hideyoshi O'Leary said. "A nice 30-piece silver set." "Quite appropriate," von Schlichten approved. "Well, you did a first-class job. I want you back with us as soon as possible. Incidentally, you're now a brigadier general. But not till the situation in Grank Krink Skilk is stabilized. And eventually, you'll probably have to set up permanent headquarters in the north." After Hideyoshi O'Leary had thanked him and signed off, the screen was dark again. He turned to the others. "Well, gentlemen, I don't think we need to worry too much about the north for the next few days. How long do you estimate this operation against Konkrook's going to take? To complete pacification, Thumb?" "How complete is complete pacification, General?" Themistocles M'zangwe wanted to know. "If you mean to the end of organized resistance by larger-than-squad-sized groups, I'd say 3 days, give or take 12 hours. Of course, there'll be small groups holding out for a couple of weeks, particularly in the farming country and back in the forest. We can forget them. That's minor tactic stuff. We'll need to keep some kind of an occupation force here for some time. They can deal with that. We'll have to get to work on Keegark as soon as possible. After we've reduced Keegark, we'll be able to reorganize for a campaign against the Free Cities on the eastern shore." "Begging your pardon, General, but reduce is a mild word for what we ought to do to Keegark," Hans Meyerstein said. "We ought to raise that city as flat as a football field, and then play football on it with King Orgzild's head." "Any special reason?" von Schlichten asked. "In addition to the Blount Le Mans massacre, that is." "I should say so, General," Themistocles M'zangwe backed up Meyerstein. "Bob, you tell him." Colonel Robert Grinnell, the intelligence officer, got up and took the cigar out of his mouth. He was short and round-bodied and bald-headed, but he was Old Terrain Federation Regular Army. "Well, General, we've been finding out quite a bit about the genesis of this business lately," he said. "From up north, it probably looked like an all-Rakkeed show, that's how it was supposed to look. But the whole thing was hatched at Keegark by King Orgzild. We've managed to capture a few prominent Konkrookans, he named half a dozen, who've been made to talk, and a number of others who have come in voluntarily and furnished information. Orgzild conceived the scheme in the beginning. Rakkeed was just the messenger boy. My face gets the color of the company trademark every time I think that the whole thing was planned for over a year, right under our noses, even to the signal that was to touch the whole thing off. The poisoning of Sid Harrington, and our announcement of his death? Von Schlichten asked. You figured that out yourself, sir? Well, that was it. Grinnell went on to elaborate, while von Schlichten tried to keep the impatience out of his face. Beside him, Paula Quinton was fidgeting too. She was thinking, as he was, of what King Orgzild and Prince Gorgrink were doing now. And I know positively that the order for the poisoning of Sid Harrington came from the Keegarkan embassy here, and was passed down through Gurgurk and Keeluk to this geek here who actually put the poison in the whiskey. Yes, I agree that Keegark should be wiped out, and I'd like to have an immediate estimate on the time it'll take to build a nuclear bomb to do the job. One of the old-fashioned plutonium fusion A-bombs will do quite well. Everybody turned quickly. There was a momentary silence, and then Colonel Evan Colbert, of the 4th Kragan Rifles, the senior officer under Themistocles Mazangui, found his voice. If that's an order, General, we'll get it done. But I'd like to remind you first of the company policy on nuclear weapons on this planet. I'm aware of that policy. I'm also aware of the reason for it. We've been compelled, because of the lack of natural fuel on Uller, to set up nuclear power reactors and furnish large quantities of plutonium to the geeks to fuel them. The company doesn't want the natives here learning of the possibility of using nuclear energy for destructive purposes. Well, gentlemen, that's a dead issue. They've learned it, thanks to our people in Niflheim, and unless my estimate is entirely wrong, King Orgzild already has at least one first-century Nagasaki-type plutonium bomb. I am inclined to believe that he had at least one such bomb, probably more, at the time when orders were sent to his embassy here for the poisoning of Governor-General Harrington. With that, he selected a cigarette from his case, offered it to Paula, and snapped his lighter. She had hers lit, and he was puffing on his own when the others finally realized what he had told them. "That's impossible!" somebody down the table shouted, as though that would make it so. Another, one of the civil administration crowd, almost exactly repeated Jules Cavini's words at Skilk. What the hell was intelligence doing? Sleeping? General von Schlichten, Colonel Grinnell took oblique cognizance of the question you've just made, by implication, a most grave charge against my department. If you're not mistaken in what you've just said, I deserve to be court-martialed. I couldn't bring charges against you, Colonel. If it were a court-martial matter, I'd belong in the dock with you, von Schlichten told him. It seems, though, that a piece of vital information was possessed by those who were unable to evaluate it, and until this afternoon, I was ignorant of its existence. Colonel Quinton, suppose you repeat what you told me on the way down from Skilk. Well, General, don't you think we ought to have Dr. Gomes do that? Paula asked. After all, he constructed those bombs on Niflheim, and it'll be he who'll have to build ours. That's right. He looked around. Where's Dr. Lorenzo Gomes, the nuclear engineer who came in on the Pretoria 2 weeks ago? Send out for him, and get him in here at once. There was another awkward silence. Then Kent Pickering, the chief of the Gongonk Island power plant, cleared his throat. Why, General, didn't you know? Dr. Gomes is dead. He was killed during the first half-hour of the Uprising. End of Chapter 12. Recording by Acacia Wood.